The last light slips beneath the dunes of Tatooine, and the sand releases the warmth it has held since morning. A faint desert wind brushes across scattered stones, carrying almost no sound at all except the distant cry of a nocturnal creature somewhere beyond the moisture farms. On a low ridge stands an old man wrapped in faded robes, his silhouette barely distinct against the deepening blue of evening. He watches two suns surrender to the horizon with the quiet patience of someone who has spent a lifetime waiting. Long before anyone called him Old Ben, before the Empire, before the Clone Wars, before the galaxy learned his name, another story had already begun. This is the complete life of Obi Wan Kenobi, told slowly and gently, a journey through the Star Wars canon designed to carry you toward peaceful sleep, while uncovering one of the richest lives ever lived by a Jedi. If you've traveled here before quietly, note which night you're joining me on. If this is your first visit, simply think of it as night one and let the story unfold at its own calm pace. There is no need to hurry through the years ahead because Obi-Wan's life stretches across the final decades of the Galactic Republic, the terrible age of the Empire, and into the first spark of hope that would become the Rebel Alliance. Every victory, every loss, every friendship, and every impossible choice rests upon another until one quiet guardian on a desert world comes to carry the future of the galaxy almost entirely alone. We begin not with war or prophecy, but with a question that has lingered for many years. How close did the galaxy come to never knowing Obi Wan Kenobi at all? The answer begins far from the familiar sands of Tatooine. According to modern Star Wars canon, Obi Wan Kenobi was born around 57 years before the Battle of Yavin on the planet Stusion, a world whose appearance has never been fully explored on screen. The name itself entered canon through George Lucas, who once revealed it in conversation, and it has remained Obi-Wan's accepted birthplace ever since. Like nearly every child destined for the Jedi Order during the final centuries of the Republic, he was taken into Jedi care while still an infant, far too young to remember the faces of his biological family. That practice had existed for thousands of years because the Jedi believed emotional attachment formed most deeply during early childhood. By bringing Force-sensitive infants into the temple almost immediately, the Order hoped to raise guardians who served the Force itself before any individual bond. Whether that tradition prevented future darkness or quietly created another kind of loneliness is one of the enduring questions surrounding the Jedi. Coruscant became Obi-Wan's true home before he could even understand the word. The entire surface of the planet had long ago disappeared beneath one immense city, its towers climbing into the clouds while millions of speeders crossed invisible highways between shining skyscrapers. Near the highest district stood the Jedi Temple, one of the Republic's oldest and most respected institutions, crowned by 5 elegant towers that overlooked the endless lights below. Within those ancient walls lived hundreds of Jedi masters, knights, Padawans, and initiates, all following routines that had changed very little across generations. Children awoke before sunrise, studied history, diplomacy, languages, meditation, lightsaber forms, and the subtle disciplines required to hear the Force without allowing emotion to overwhelm judgment. Obi-Wan knew these halls long before he ever stepped onto an unfamiliar world. Their polished stone floors, quiet meditation chambers, and open training courtyards formed the landscape of his childhood. What does childhood even mean inside the Jedi Temple, where every lesson gently reminds you to release possession before you are old enough to own anything? Obi-Wan grew among many other younglings in clans organized by age, each guided by experienced instructors such as Master Yoda, whose centuries of wisdom shaped countless generations of Jedi. Canon never records every lesson Obi-Wan attended, yet it establishes the rhythm clearly enough to picture it without contradicting anything known. Mornings often began with meditation before practical instruction followed, and afternoons mixed physical discipline with philosophical discussion. Younglings learned to assemble training sabers, practiced balance exercises high above the temple floor, and memorized the history of the Republic alongside the ethical responsibilities expected of peacekeepers. They were taught that the Force connected every living thing, and the true strength came not through domination but through harmony. Those ideas settled into Obi-Wan's mind so early that even decades later, during the Empire's darkest years, they continued guiding nearly every choice he made. Among the temple's earliest traditions stood one ceremony every initiate anticipated with equal excitement and anxiety. Each child would eventually enter the gathering, a sacred journey to the crystal caves of Elam, where kyber crystals revealed themselves to those who listened to the Force. Although modern canon explores that ritual most fully through later generations, especially during the Clone Wars, it represents an ancient custom that Obi-Wan himself also experienced during his youth. Somewhere beneath Elam's frozen surface, in silence broken only by shifting ice and distant echoes, he found the crystal destined for his first true lightsaber. That simple object would accompany him through years of training before later weapons replaced it, yet every Jedi remembered the first moment a crystal answered its future guardian. The lightsaber was never merely a weapon. It was an outward expression of discipline, identity, and trust between a Jedi and the living Force. Life inside the temple was orderly, but it was never guaranteed to unfold exactly as each child imagined. Not every initiate found a Jedi Master willing to accept them as a Padawan learner. Those who reached a certain age without being chosen often entered one of the Jedi Service Corps, organizations that served the Republic in ways far removed from the front lines. Among these divisions stood the Agricultural Corps, responsible for improving harvests, restoring damaged ecosystems, and supporting worlds struggling with famine. It was honorable work, respected by the Order, yet many initiates quietly viewed it as evidence they had fallen short of becoming Jedi Knights. Obi-Wan himself approached that uncertain crossroads. Canon confirms he stood dangerously close to entering the Agricultural Corps before destiny shifted course in a way few could have predicted. Why did no master immediately choose the boy who would someday defeat Darth Maul, survive the Clone Wars, and train the Chosen One? At first glance, the question seems almost impossible. Looking backward from history, Obi-Wan appears destined for greatness, calm under pressure and remarkably gifted. Yet the Jedi of his youth could not see the future any more clearly than anyone else. They judged children through present ability, emotional maturity, and compatibility with potential teachers, rather than legendary futures that had not yet unfolded. Obi-Wan was disciplined, certainly, but he was also earnest, occasionally impatient, and still discovering who he truly was. Greatness rarely announces itself during childhood. Sometimes it waits quietly until the right mentor notices qualities everyone else overlooked. That mentor entered Obi-Wan's life through circumstances that reveal much about the complexity of the Jedi themselves. Before accepting Obi-Wan as his Padawan, Qui-Gon Jinn had already trained another apprentice, the gifted Jedi named Xanatos. In current canon, the details surrounding Xanatos remain far less extensive than in the old Legends continuity, where his tragic fall became central to Qui-Gon's life. Because modern canon has not adopted that complete story, we leave Legends respectfully where it belongs, separate from established history. What canon does preserve is the broader truth that Qui-Gon had trained before and possessed an independent spirit often at odds with the Jedi Council. He valued the living force above rigid interpretation of tradition, trusted instinct more readily than procedure, and believed compassion sometimes required stepping outside comfortable rules. Those qualities would shape Obi-Wan in ways neither teacher nor student fully understood at the time. Qui-Gon eventually recognized something beneath Obi-Wan's careful discipline that others had failed to appreciate. Their partnership did not begin because the Council arranged it with perfect confidence. Instead, it grew from mutual respect earned through experience, patience, and trust. Obi-Wan entered his apprenticeship eager to prove himself worthy, while Qui-Gon remained determined to teach the boy to think beyond simple obedience. Their personalities often contrasted in revealing ways. Obi-Wan admired structure and carefully followed established Jedi doctrine, whereas Qui-Gon listened first to the Force itself, even when that guidance conflicted with political expectations or council decisions. Rather than weakening their relationship, those differences gradually strengthened it. Each balanced something the other lacked. The years that followed carried master and apprentice across countless Republic worlds. Though canon leaves many of those early missions untold, here the silence between recorded events invites careful imagination rather than contradiction. You can picture diplomatic negotiations inside marble Senate buildings on distant mid-rim planets, quiet investigations through rain-soaked settlements, or long hyperspace voyages where teacher and student discussed ancient Jedi philosophy beneath the steady vibration of their transport's engines. None of those images alter established history. They simply fill the ordinary days that every life contains between the moments historians choose to record. It was during these quieter years, far from famous battles, that Obi-Wan truly became Qui-Gon's student. As darkness settles completely over the desert, the old guardian remains motionless upon the ridge, watching stars slowly emerge above Tatooine's silent horizon. The boy from Stujon cannot yet see Naboo waiting in the future, cannot imagine Darth Maul igniting a crimson blade, and certainly cannot know that one frightened slave child on a distant desert world will soon change the course of his entire life. For now, there is only the calm rhythm of learning, the gentle guidance of a patient master, and the comforting certainty that tomorrow's lessons will begin again with the sunrise over Coruscant's towering skyline. That quiet season will not last much longer, but for one peaceful moment, the galaxy still rests before the storm. Why did the Jedi Council fail to recognize the return of the Sith until it was almost too late. The answer cannot be found in a single battle or a single decision, because the shadow had been growing for decades while the Republic congratulated itself on an age of peace. During the years of Obi Wan Kenobi's apprenticeship, the Galactic Republic governed tens of thousands of member worlds through the Galactic Senate on Coruscant, while the Jedi Order served as guardians rather than soldiers. Few alive believed the Sith still existed beyond old stories and temple archives. The last confirmed Sith conflicts belong to ancient history, separated from Obi-Wan's generation by nearly a millennium. Even masters who remained cautious rarely expected the darkness was already moving behind the highest levels of galactic politics. Qui-Gon Jinn understood something many of his fellow Jedi did not. He respected the Council deeply, but he did not mistake agreement for wisdom. His loyalty rested first with what he called the living force, the immediate current of life flowing through every moment rather than distant plans constructed years in advance. Obi-Wan, meanwhile, admired order, discipline, and careful adherence to Jedi teaching. Their conversations during hyperspace voyages often reflected those differences. Qui-Gon encouraged questions instead of obedience for its own sake, while Obi-Wan searched for certainty inside established principles, believing that centuries of accumulated knowledge deserved trust before instinct alone. Those differences became especially visible during assignments throughout the Mid-Rim and Outer Rim. Modern canon records only fragments of these missions, while novels such as Master and Apprentice illuminate the relationship between teacher and student without contradicting the films. Obi-Wan learned diplomacy by watching Qui-Gon calm frightened governors, negotiate with criminal syndicates, and settle disputes without igniting his lightsaber. Again and again he witnessed his master choosing patience over speed. Every successful negotiation reinforced an old Jedi belief that a lightsaber represented failure only after every peaceful path had already closed. One mission in particular revealed how differently the two men viewed the future. Qui-Gon was repeatedly offered a seat on the Jedi Council, one of the highest honors within the Order. Membership meant influence over Republic policy, responsibility for training standards, and a permanent voice in decisions affecting every Jedi across the galaxy. Yet Qui-Gon declined those opportunities more than once. He believed service to the Force mattered more than rank, and he feared that political responsibility inside the temple could distance him from the guidance he sensed through direct experience. Obi-Wan admired the Council so deeply that he struggled to understand his master's refusal. What did a young apprentice learn from watching the most respected institution in the galaxy questioned by the very teacher he admired? Obi-Wan did not become rebellious. Instead, he slowly discovered that respect and disagreement could exist together. Qui-Gon never encouraged arrogance toward the Council. Rather, he demonstrated that wisdom sometimes required asking difficult questions, even when surrounded by wise people. That lesson would remain hidden beneath Obi-Wan's disciplined exterior for many years, emerging fully only after the Republic itself collapsed. As Obi-Wan matured, another talent became increasingly obvious. He was not the strongest duelist of his generation, nor the most naturally gifted with spectacular force abilities. Instead, he excelled through consistency. Every exercise inside the temple training halls was repeated until instinct replaced conscious effort. Every defensive movement became smoother than the one before it. This discipline eventually shaped his mastery of Form 3, Sorisu, the lightsaber style centered upon defense, endurance, and absolute economy of motion. By the end of his life, many considered him the greatest practitioner of that form the Jedi Order had ever produced. Sorisu suited Obi-Wan because it reflected his character rather than changing it. Instead of seeking overwhelming attacks, he patiently allowed opponents to exhaust themselves through aggression. The form emphasized precise footwork, compact movements, and nearly impenetrable defense, turning survival itself into a strategic advantage. Years later, this mastery would allow him to stand against enemies physically stronger than himself, including General Grievous, Darth Vader, and numerous separatist commanders. None of that skill appeared overnight. It emerged through thousands of quiet hours inside temple courtyards, where no historians stood watching. The Republic itself seemed equally stable during those peaceful years. Chancellor Finis Valorum still occupied the highest political office before the rise of Sheev Palpatine. Vast commercial organizations such as the Trade Federation expanded their influence across the Outer Rim, legally operating enormous fleets under the protection of Senate charters. On the surface, these corporations appeared to be economic powers rather than military threats. Yet loopholes, corruption, and endless Senate debate allowed private interests to accumulate astonishing resources. The machinery that would eventually fuel galactic war was already being assembled, while most citizens continued their ordinary lives. Hidden beneath that growing political tension stood one man whose true identity remained completely unknown. Sheev Palpatine of Naboo served publicly as a respected senator representing his peaceful homeworld. Secretly, however, he was Darth Sidious, Dark Lord of the Sith, and apprentice to Darth Plagueis before murdering his own master. Neither Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, nor the Jedi Council possessed even the smallest confirmed evidence connecting the polite senator to the ancient Sith Order. Sidious manipulated commerce, regional disputes, and political ambition from the shadows with extraordinary patience. Every crisis pushed the Republic a little closer toward the future he desired. At the same time, another figure trained far from Coruscant beneath Sidious's relentless instruction. Darth Maul had been raised almost entirely as a weapon, molded from childhood into an assassin whose loyalty belonged exclusively to his Sith master. His training emphasized speed, precision, pain tolerance, and absolute hatred for the Jedi. Unlike many Sith who pursued political influence or forbidden scholarship, Maul existed primarily to destroy. He waited in secrecy for years, because Sidious understood that revealing the Sith too early would endanger decades of careful planning. While Obi-Wan polished defensive techniques beneath the temple's bright skies, Maul sharpened his double-bladed lightsaber in darkness. Why would the Sith remain hidden after waiting nearly 1,000 years for revenge? Ancient impatience had repeatedly destroyed them. Darth Bane's rule of two, established centuries earlier, demanded that only a master and an apprentice carry the Sith legacy forward at any given time. Their strength depended upon secrecy until victory became certain. Sidious followed that philosophy with remarkable discipline, allowing the Jedi to believe they faced only isolated political disputes, while he quietly positioned allies across the Republic. By the time the Sith finally revealed themselves, the Republic would already be standing exactly where Sidious wanted it. Then, in 32 years before the Battle of Yavin, events accelerated almost overnight. The Trade Federation, led publicly by Viceroy Newt Gunray, established a blockade around the peaceful world of Naboo in response to taxation imposed on trade routes by the Galactic Senate. Thousands of battle droids stood ready aboard immense Lucrehulk-class control ships orbiting the planet. Chancellor Valorum faced mounting criticism inside the Senate as negotiations stalled. The Jedi Council dispatched 2 ambassadors aboard the Republic cruiser Radiant 7 to resolve what still appeared to be a political dispute. Those ambassadors were Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn and his apprentice, Obi Wan Kenobi, unaware that every step they were about to take had already been anticipated by Darth Sidious himself. How could a diplomatic mission, meant to settle a trade dispute, become the moment that ended 1,000 years of certainty? The Republic believed Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi Wan Kenobi were traveling to Naboo simply to negotiate with the Trade Federation. Chancellor Finis Valorum hoped respected Jedi ambassadors could persuade Viceroy Newt Gunray to lift the blockade without bloodshed. Instead, the Jedi stepped directly into Darth Sidious's carefully prepared trap. The Federation's Lucrehulk-class battleships already surrounded Naboo, their immense circular hulls carrying hundreds of thousands of battle droids and enough firepower to overwhelm a peaceful world. Before Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan even reached the negotiating chamber, Sidious ordered Gunray to eliminate them. Poison gas flooded the conference room aboard the Trade Federation flagship. Gunray assumed no living beings could survive the attack. Moments later, brilliant blue and green lightsabers cut through heavy blast doors as Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan advanced into corridors suddenly filled with B-1 battle droids. These mechanical soldiers, controlled through central command systems orbiting above Naboo, lacked imagination but possessed overwhelming numbers. Obi-Wan fought exactly as years of temple discipline had taught him. Every movement remained compact, defensive, and economical, preserving energy while allowing his master to dictate the pace of their escape. The pair reached the hangar and seized a Trade Federation landing craft before descending through Naboo's atmosphere. What greeted them below bore little resemblance to the prosperous world described in the Republic records. Federation armored columns already rolled across green plains toward the capital city of Theed. A AB-9, airspeeders, and multi-troop transports carried wave after wave of battle droids toward government buildings that had offered almost no resistance. Queen Padme Amidala had been captured alongside her advisors. The invasion proceeded so quickly that the Senate on Coruscant still debated legality, while Naboo itself disappeared under occupation. Why did Qui-Gon abandon the direct mission almost immediately after landing? The answer reveals how differently he understood the role of a Jedi. Rather than racing toward military objectives, he chose to protect individual lives standing directly before him. During their journey through Naboo's forests, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan encountered Jar Jar Binks, a clumsy but good-hearted Gungan who had been exiled from Oto Gunga. Many Jedi might have viewed the meeting as an inconvenient delay. Qui-Gon instead accepted the encounter as guidance from the living force, believing unexpected paths often concealed the most important destinations. Jar Jar led the Jedi through the underwater tunnels connecting the Gungan city to the surface. Massive Fomba beasts drifted through the dark waters outside their transport while enormous predators hunted smaller creatures in the endless depths. Qui-Gon famously observed, "There's always a bigger fish," after several terrifying encounters beneath Naboo's lakes. The line carried more meaning than simple humor. It reflected his understanding that visible dangers often concealed greater threats lurking beyond immediate sight. Obi-Wan heard the words, but could not yet appreciate how completely they described the political storm gathering around the Republic itself. Emerging near Theed, the Jedi infiltrated the occupied capital with remarkable precision. They quietly entered the royal palace, avoiding patrols of battle droids until reaching Queen Amidala's prison chambers. Padme herself had already begun demonstrating qualities that would define her entire life. Although only 14 years old, she remained composed under occupation, thinking first about the survival of her people rather than her own safety. With assistance from Captain Panaka and the Royal Naboo security forces, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan freed the Queen and escaped the city aboard the Royal J-type Nubian starship before Federation forces could intercept them. The escape came at considerable cost. As the sleek silver cruiser accelerated into orbit, Trade Federation battleships opened fire. Turbo laser impacts damaged the vessel's hyperdrive, forcing Captain Panaka to seek an emergency landing rather than continue directly to Coruscant. The ship's astromech droids hurried outside into open space, repairing exposed systems while enemy fire destroyed one after another. Only R2-D2 successfully completed the critical repairs necessary to keep the vessel alive. Even then, the hyperdrive remained too badly damaged for the journey to the Republic capital. Qui-Gon selected nearby Tatooine as the safest location to obtain replacement parts. What force drew Qui-Gon Jinn toward one insignificant desert world among countless possibilities across the Outer Rim? Officially, Tatooine offered anonymity because it lay outside Republic jurisdiction, controlled largely by the Hutt cartel rather than the Senate. Hidden beneath that practical explanation, however, rested one of the most significant moments in galactic history. Mos Espa appeared ordinary enough, crowded with moisture traders, mechanics, gamblers, Jawas, and wandering merchants. Heat shimmered above dusty streets while pod racer engines echoed through repair garages. Obi-Wan remained aboard the damaged cruiser, helping oversee security, leaving Qui-Gon, Jar Jar, Padme disguised as a handmaiden, and R2-D2 to search for replacement hyperdrive components. Inside Watto's cluttered workshop, Qui-Gon encountered a small human boy named Anakin Skywalker. The child lived as a slave alongside his mother, Shmi Skywalker, both legally owned by the Toydarian junk dealer. Anakin possessed extraordinary mechanical talent, despite being only 9 years old. He had assembled his own pod racer from salvaged parts, something no ordinary human child could safely pilot because pod racing demanded superhuman reflexes. During quiet conversation, Qui-Gon sensed an astonishing connection to the Force surrounding the boy. Modern canon confirms that Anakin carried an unprecedented midi-chlorian count, even surpassing Master Yoda according to Qui-Gon's portable blood analysis. Obi-Wan never witnessed those first conversations with Anakin directly. Yet the consequences would define the rest of his life more completely than almost any other event. While Qui-Gon investigated the mysterious child, Obi-Wan remained focused on immediate responsibilities aboard the royal ship. His discipline reflected the instincts of a reliable Padawan. He trusted his master completely, assuming every delay served a larger purpose. Neither student nor teacher could yet know they had stumbled into the center of an ancient prophecy concerning the Chosen One, a figure destined, according to Jedi belief, to bring balance to the Force. The hyperdrive repairs depended upon one desperate gamble. Watto refused Republic credits, forcing Qui-Gon to negotiate another arrangement. The solution became the Bunta Eve Classic, the most dangerous pod race on Tatooine. Anakin volunteered to compete despite never having raced professionally. Victory would earn the parts needed to repair Queen Amidala's ship, and through Qui-Gon's carefully negotiated wager, secure the boy's freedom as well. The entire future balanced upon a race across scorching desert canyons. Far beyond Mos Espa, Darth Sidious continued directing the occupation of Naboo, unaware that events on a forgotten Outer Rim world had already begun unraveling plans he believed were perfectly under control. Why did Darth Maul reveal himself on Tatooine instead of waiting for a battlefield where victory seemed almost certain? That brief encounter remains one of the most important moments in the history of the Jedi Order. Until then, the Sith had hidden for nearly 1,000 years under the rule of two established by Darth Bane. Sidious had spent decades manipulating the Republic from the shadows with extraordinary patience. Sending Maul openly against a Jedi Knight risked exposing everything before the larger plan reached completion. Yet Sidious understood another truth. Qui-Gon Jinn had found something on Tatooine that could no longer be ignored. The Bunta Eve Classic unfolded beneath an unforgiving desert sun. Hundreds of spectators crowded wooden platforms, overlooking the starting line while the enormous engines of pod racers shook the canyon walls. Sebulba, the Dug champion, entered the race as the overwhelming favorite after years of victories on Tatooine's brutal circuits. Anakin Skywalker stood among seasoned professionals, despite being only 9 years old, the only known human capable of competing because his connection to the Force granted reflexes beyond ordinary perception. Qui-Gon watched calmly from the stands, outwardly composed but fully aware that much more than a sporting event depended upon the outcome. Obi-Wan remained aboard Queen Amidala's damaged J-type Nubian cruiser throughout the race, protecting the ship and preparing for immediate departure once replacement components arrived. It is easy to remember only the dramatic duel and forget the patient discipline that filled the hours surrounding it. Obi-Wan never complained about being left behind. His responsibility was clear, and he fulfilled it without hesitation. This quiet reliability had become one of Qui-Gon's greatest reasons for trusting him. The apprentice understood that not every decisive contribution happened in the center of attention. Against extraordinary odds, Anakin won the Bunta Eve Classic after surviving engine failures, deadly collisions, and Sebulba's repeated attempts at sabotage. Watto honored the wager despite his obvious frustration. The hyperdrive parts became available, and Anakin's freedom was secured, although Shmi Skywalker remained enslaved on Tatooine. That painful separation would echo through Anakin's life long after the celebration ended. Qui-Gon promised Shmi that her son would become a Jedi. He could not promise that mother and child would ever meet again. What passed through Obi-Wan's thoughts when Qui-Gon returned with a former slave child and declared that the boy might be the chosen one, canon gives us only fragments, yet those fragments speak clearly. Obi-Wan respected his master deeply, but he did not immediately embrace every conclusion Qui-Gon reached. His training encouraged caution, evidence, and careful judgment. A prophecy recorded in ancient Jedi texts seemed far less certain than the practical dangers already surrounding Queen Amidala. Even so, Obi-Wan trusted Qui-Gon's instincts enough to accept that this remarkable child deserved serious consideration. Before the royal cruiser could escape Tatooine, the waiting ended. As the ship prepared for departure, a black-robed warrior arrived aboard a blood-red Sith speeder. His face bore intricate black and crimson markings, and small horns crowned his head, identifying him as a Zabrak from Dathomir. Without a word, Darth Maul ignited a crimson lightsaber, unlike any weapon Obi-Wan had ever faced. Until that instant, the color alone carried enormous significance. The Sith had returned, not as rumor or ancient legend, but as living enemies standing only meters away. Qui-Gon stepped forward while Obi-Wan remained trapped behind the rapidly rising boarding ramp. The apprentice could do nothing except watch through narrowing space as master and stranger exchanged swift, disciplined strikes in the desert dust. Maul fought with astonishing speed, pressing relentless attacks that forced Qui-Gon entirely onto the defensive. The duel lasted only moments before the cruiser lifted away, separating the combatants. Yet those few seconds transformed everything. For the first time in nearly a millennium, a Jedi had crossed blades with a Sith Lord and survived to report it. The journey to Coruscant carried an uneasy silence. Anakin marveled at the endless stars outside the viewport, unaware that his arrival would divide the Jedi Council almost immediately. Qui-Gon reflected upon the warrior he had encountered on Tatooine. Obi-Wan listened carefully as his master described Maul's discipline, aggression, and unmistakable connection to the dark side. Neither doubted the conclusion. Whoever the attacker had been, he possessed training beyond anything an ordinary assassin could acquire. The Jedi Council convened inside its circular chamber overlooking the endless skyline of Coruscant. 12 seats surrounded the room, occupied by masters including Yoda, Mace Windu, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Plo Koon, Saesee Tiin, Adi Gallia, Depa Billaba, Even Piell, Oppo Rancisis, Eth Koth, Yarael Poof, and Yaddle. Qui-Gon reported every detail of the Naboo blockade, the invasion, the child discovered on Tatooine, and the duel with the mysterious warrior. His conclusion was direct. The attacker had been a Sith. Why did the Council hesitate when confronted with evidence that seems unmistakable in hindsight? Part of the answer lies in centuries of peace. The Sith had disappeared from recorded history roughly 1,000 years earlier after the apparent end of the old Sith Wars. Extraordinary claims demanded extraordinary proof, particularly when the political consequences threatened to destabilize the Republic. Mace Windu acknowledged the possibility but remained cautious. Yoda sensed uncertainty surrounding the future itself. The Council agreed only that the matter required further investigation rather than immediate acceptance. The debate surrounding Anakin proved equally difficult. Qui-Gon presented the boy as the possible fulfillment of the ancient prophecy concerning the Chosen One, emphasizing his unprecedented midi-chlorian count and extraordinary natural abilities. The Council responded not with excitement but concern. During Anakin's evaluation, Yoda perceived fear already rooted within the child's heart. Fear of loss, fear for his mother, fear that years of slavery had left emotional wounds too deep to ignore. The Council concluded that Anakin was too old to begin Jedi training under their traditional standards. For perhaps the first time in his apprenticeship, Obi-Wan found himself standing quietly between two visions of the Jedi future. On one side stood the Council, guardians of centuries of accumulated wisdom and discipline. On the other stood Qui-Gon Jinn, whose faith in the living Force remained unshaken despite official rejection. Obi-Wan respected both completely. He still believed the Council would ultimately guide the Order correctly, yet he had also learned that his master rarely defended a position without profound conviction. That quiet tension would accompany them back to Naboo, where negotiations had already failed, armies were preparing for battle, and Darth Maul was waiting to finish the encounter, interrupted beneath the blazing suns of Tatooine. Why did the Battle of Naboo become the beginning of both Obi Wan Kenobi's greatest triumph and his deepest, lifelong burden? Looking backward, it is tempting to see the conflict only as the first victory over the Sith in 1,000 years. Yet for Obi-Wan, the day unfolded as a sequence of devastating losses hidden inside apparent success. The invasion of Naboo would end, the Trade Federation would retreat, Chancellor Palpatine would rise to supreme political power, Qui-Gon Jinn would die, Anakin Skywalker would enter the Jedi Order. Every one of those events belonged to the same single day, each quietly shaping the next 3 decades of galactic history. Queen Amidala refused to surrender her world through diplomacy alone. Returning from Coruscant after failing to secure immediate Senate action, she forged an alliance once thought impossible between the human population of Naboo and the Gungans led by Boss Nass. For generations, misunderstanding and isolation had divided the two peoples, despite sharing the same planet. Jar Jar Binks unexpectedly became the bridge between them, convincing Boss Nass that Naboo's fate threatened both civilizations alike. While the Gungan Grand Army prepared to confront the Federation droid forces across the grassy plains, Padme organized a smaller strike team aimed directly at reclaiming the royal palace in Theed. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan accompanied her, understanding that somewhere nearby Darth Maul would almost certainly appear again. The battle unfolded simultaneously across land, sky, and orbit. Gungan Fomba shield generators pushed steadily toward advancing ranks of battle droids, while MTT transports unloaded endless mechanical infantry. Above Naboo, young Anakin Skywalker accidentally launched aboard an N-1 starfighter and became trapped within the larger conflict against the Federation control ship. Captain Panica led palace assaults through marble corridors, beneath towering columns, fighting room by room toward the throne chamber where Newt Gunray waited. Every participant believed their own struggle might determine the outcome. None realized that the duel between 3 Force users inside the palace power station would become the moment remembered by history. Why did Darth Maul choose to separate Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan instead of facing them together? The answer reflects the precision of his training. Maul understood that 2 coordinated Jedi posed a greater danger than either individually, As the three combatants raced through Naboo's gleaming corridors, they entered the vast plasma reactor complex beneath Theed. Narrow catwalks stretched across dizzying depths, while brilliant streams of glowing energy surged through towering magnetic containment fields. Automatic laser gates activated and deactivated in timed sequence, repeatedly isolating the duelists from one another. What appeared at first to be random architecture became an ally for the Sith. Maul's double-bladed lightsaber remained unlike anything Obi-Wan had previously encountered. The ancient design had largely disappeared from common Jedi use centuries earlier, making its sudden return deeply unsettling. Each crimson blade extended from opposite ends of a single hilt, allowing rapid combinations that flowed seamlessly between attack and defense. Qui-Gon relied upon Form 4, Ataru, a physically demanding style emphasizing speed, athletic movement, and aggressive offense. Obi-Wan balanced that approach with the defensive instincts already becoming natural to him. Together they complemented one another remarkably well. Apart, each faced Maul under very different circumstances. The laser barriers briefly divided the fighters into separate chambers. Obi-Wan found himself pacing impatiently behind an active energy gate, while Qui-Gon stood alone before Darth Maul. It remains one of the quietest moments in the entire prequel trilogy. Qui-Gon lowered himself into meditation, kneeling calmly despite the Sith standing only meters away. Maul never looked away from his opponent, maintaining absolute focus while crimson light reflected across the polished floor. Obi-Wan watched silently, unable to help, unable even to speak across the humming barrier. The contrast between master and apprentice revealed years of experience separating them. Qui-Gon accepted the pause as part of the Force. Obi-Wan experienced only urgency. When the final barrier dissolved, events accelerated with terrible speed. Maul drove Qui-Gon backward through a series of rapid strikes before slipping past the Jedi Master's defenses with a fatal thrust. The crimson blade pierced Qui-Gon's abdomen. Mortally wounded, he collapsed against the reactor platform, while Obi-Wan reached him only moments too late. Grief erupted with overwhelming force. Until that instant, Obi-Wan had fought as an apprentice following his master's lead. Suddenly, he stood alone. How close did Obi-Wan come to repeating the fate that had claimed so many Jedi before him? His immediate response was fueled by anger, something the Jedi consistently warned against. Maul sensed it and pressed the advantage, forcing Obi-Wan backward across narrow platforms suspended above seemingly endless shafts. One powerful strike sent Obi-Wan falling. His lightsaber tumbled into the depths, while he managed to catch the edge of a maintenance platform with only his fingertips. Hanging above a bottomless abyss, exhausted and weaponless, he found himself in precisely the position Maul believed guaranteed victory. The moment that followed became one of the defining choices of Obi-Wan's life. Instead of surrendering to panic or hatred, he regained control. Hanging from the platform, he reached through the Force toward Qui-Gon's fallen lightsaber lying several meters away. The weapon leapt into his waiting hand. With one explosive movement, he vaulted upward over Maul's head, striking before the Sith could fully react. The blue blade cut cleanly through Maul's double lightsaber and continued through his body. Maul fell into the reactor shaft below, disappearing into darkness. Modern canon later revealed that he survived through extraordinary hatred and the dark side, eventually returning during the Clone Wars with cybernetic legs. At the time, however, everyone present believed the last Sith warrior had been destroyed. Obi-Wan hurried immediately to Qui-Gon's side. The battle surrounding them still echoed through the palace, yet everything important had narrowed to one quiet conversation. Dying, Qui-Gon repeated the conviction he had defended before the council: train the boy. He believed Anakin Skywalker remained the chosen one despite every objection raised by Yoda and the other masters. Obi-Wan promised he would honor that final request. It was not a promise made lightly. It became the foundation upon which the remainder of his entire life would stand. Elsewhere across Naboo, victory arrived almost simultaneously. Anakin accidentally flew his N-1 starfighter into the Trade Federation control ship orbiting above the planet, destroying its reactor from within and shutting down the central droid control network. Across the plains, countless B-1 battle droids collapsed instantly where they stood. Queen Amidala captured Newt Gunray inside the reclaimed royal palace. The invasion ended. Naboo celebrated liberation beneath clear skies while citizens filled the streets of Theed with music and banners. To almost everyone present, the future suddenly appeared bright once again. The funeral that followed carried a quieter truth. Qui-Gon Jinn's body rested upon a ceremonial pyre surrounded by members of the Jedi Order, Queen Amidala, Captain Panaka, Jar Jar Binks, Boss Nass, and the people whose world he had helped save. Flames rose slowly into the evening air as Yoda and Mace Windu discussed a question that neither could answer with certainty. If the Sith had truly returned, there must always be two: one master, one apprentice. Darth Maul appeared dead before them. Somewhere in the galaxy, unseen and completely unsuspected, Darth Sidious watched the smoke rise with calm satisfaction, while beside the funeral fire, Obi Wan Kenobi quietly accepted the responsibility of training a boy who would one day become both his greatest joy and his greatest heartbreak. Why did the Jedi Council entrust Anakin Skywalker to a newly knighted Obi Wan Kenobi after expressing such deep concern about the boy only days earlier? On the surface, the decision appears contradictory. The Council had declared Anakin too old, too fearful, and too emotionally attached to begin Jedi training according to long-established tradition. Yet Qui-Gon's final request carried enormous weight, and Obi-Wan himself had changed forever on Naboo. By defeating Darth Maul, he had completed the trials required to become a Jedi Knight. More importantly, he had demonstrated composure after unbearable personal loss, revealing a maturity that no formal examination could measure. Yoda accepted Obi-Wan's promise with visible hesitation. He did not suddenly believe every concern surrounding Anakin had disappeared. The future remained clouded, something Yoda repeatedly described as increasingly difficult to perceive through the Force. Nevertheless, Qui-Gon had been one of the Order's most respected masters. Despite his disagreements with the Council, his dying conviction could not simply be dismissed. Obi-Wan pledged not merely to honor a friend's final wish, but to devote his own life to raising and guiding the child, whom Qui-Gon believed destined to restore balance to the Force. The relationship that followed differed from almost every other Jedi partnership. Most Padawans began training between infancy and early childhood, allowing many years to develop emotional discipline before adolescence. Anakin entered the temple at 9 years old, carrying vivid memories of slavery, separation from his mother, and an intense gratitude toward the people who had freed him. Obi-Wan, meanwhile, had only recently stopped thinking of himself, primarily as Qui-Gon's apprentice. Overnight, he became both student and teacher, still mourning one mentor while trying to become another. Their partnership began with affection and respect, but neither had expected responsibility to arrive so suddenly. What kind of teacher did Obi-Wan become during those first years? The answer lies somewhere between Qui-Gon Jinn and the Jedi Council. Obi-Wan admired Jedi tradition more deeply than his own master ever had. He insisted upon discipline, regular study, meditation, and careful adherence to the code because those principles had carried him safely through his own apprenticeship. Yet traces of Qui-Gon's influence quietly remained beneath that structured exterior. Obi-Wan listened more carefully than many realized. He encouraged Anakin's remarkable talents instead of suppressing them, even when those talents often produced spectacular mischief alongside genuine brilliance. Anakin learned astonishingly fast. His natural gifts with the Force appeared in almost every discipline, from lightsaber combat to piloting, mechanics, and reflex-based exercises. Even experienced masters noticed abilities uncommon among Padawans several years older. At the same time, impatience followed him everywhere. Success came so easily in certain areas that frustration arrived immediately whenever obstacles resisted quick solutions. Obi-Wan recognized both sides of his apprentice. He admired Anakin's generosity and courage while repeatedly cautioning him against overconfidence. The two spent countless hours traveling aboard Republic transports between distant systems. Canon records only a fraction of these journeys, yet they formed the ordinary fabric of their shared life. Hyperspace travel often lasted hours or days, depending upon established routes through the galaxy. During those quiet intervals, Obi-Wan corrected lightsaber technique, assigned historical reading from the temple archives, discussed diplomacy, or simply shared meals with the boy who increasingly felt less like a student and more like family. The Republic still enjoyed relative peace, allowing many assignments to involve mediation rather than warfare. Neither imagined how quickly that peace would disappear. One quality distinguished Obi-Wan from many fellow Jedi throughout these years. He developed extraordinary patience when facing Anakin's endless questions. The younger Jedi challenged assumptions constantly, asking why traditions existed instead of simply accepting them. At times, those conversations became exhausting. Obi-Wan occasionally answered with dry humor, gentle sarcasm, or visible exasperation, qualities that later audiences would come to recognize as essential parts of his personality. Beneath those exchanges rested genuine affection. Their disagreements rarely weakened the bond between them. Instead, they revealed a relationship closer to older brother and younger brother than distant master and apprentice. Why did so many outside observers mistake Obi-Wan's restraint for emotional distance? In reality, he cared deeply about those entrusted to him. The Jedi Code discouraged possessive attachment rather than compassion itself, a distinction often misunderstood both within the galaxy and among audiences watching from afar. Obi-Wan consistently risked his own safety for strangers, defended fellow Jedi without hesitation, and remained fiercely loyal to friends such as Bail Organa and later Commander Cody. His feelings were genuine. His discipline lay in refusing to let those feelings control his judgment. That balance demanded constant effort rather than natural detachment. As Anakin matured into adolescence, another friendship quietly deepened beyond the attention of most Jedi. Senator Padme Amidala returned frequently to Coruscant following her election from Queen of Naboo to representative in the Galactic Senate. Obi-Wan observed that Anakin admired her enormously, though he interpreted those emotions at first as the lingering gratitude of a child rescued from slavery by someone who had shown unexpected kindness. Canon gives no indication that Obi-Wan immediately suspected romantic attachment. Instead, he viewed Padme as a trusted ally of the Republic and a capable public servant navigating increasingly unstable politics. Meanwhile, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine strengthened his influence year after year. His rise to office had begun directly after the Naboo crisis, when the Senate voted no confidence in Chancellor Valorum. Publicly, Palpatine presented himself as a calm, compassionate leader devoted to restoring stability. Privately, Darth Sidious continued manipulating every major political development from behind carefully constructed identities. He also cultivated a remarkably close relationship with Anakin Skywalker. To the Jedi, this appeared understandable. The Chancellor took a personal interest in an unusually gifted young hero from Naboo. Only later would Obi-Wan understand how deliberately those conversations had been encouraged. By approximately 22 years before the Battle of Yavin, 10 years had passed since Naboo. Obi-Wan Kenobi had grown into a respected Jedi Knight known throughout the Order for diplomacy, discipline, and dependable judgment. Anakin Skywalker stood on the edge of adulthood, immensely talented yet increasingly restless beneath Jedi expectations. Across the Republic, separatist movements gathered under the leadership of former Jedi Master Count Dooku, Qui-Gon's own teacher, who had left the Order years earlier. Trade disputes, regional conflicts, and Senate corruption multiplied with unsettling speed. The years of peace that shaped Obi-Wan's youth had quietly come to an end, and the next assignment to Naboo would draw teacher and apprentice into a crisis from which the galaxy would never fully recover. Why did Count Dooku, once one of the Jedi Order's greatest masters, become the man who opened the door to the Clone Wars? The question haunted Obi-Wan long before he ever stood face to face with his former Grandmaster. Dooku had trained Qui-Gon Jinn with exceptional skill and had earned immense respect throughout the Order before resigning years before the events on Naboo. Officially, he had grown disillusioned with the corruption consuming the Galactic Senate and believed the Republic no longer deserved unquestioning loyalty. Secretly, he had already become Darth Tyrannus, apprentice to Darth Sidious, helping construct the very conflict he claimed to oppose. Obi-Wan entered this crisis believing he was pursuing a political separatist. He would soon discover he was hunting a Sith Lord. The assignment began on Coruscant in 22 BBY with an attempted assassination against Senator Padme Amidala as her silver Naboo cruiser approached the immense city planet. Explosives destroyed the decoy ship carrying one of her handmaidens, Corday, who died believing she protected her queen. Padme survived because she had once again exchanged places with a decoy, a tactic that had served her since the Naboo crisis. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine immediately urged stronger protection for the senator. The Jedi Council assigned Obi-Wan and Anakin to guard her, reuniting the pair with the woman whose lives had become intertwined with theirs a decade earlier. Years had transformed both Jedi. Obi-Wan had become a composed and respected knight entering the height of his abilities. Anakin, now 19 years old, possessed remarkable confidence that often bordered on impatience. Their conversations reflected a familiarity impossible to fake. Obi-Wan corrected his apprentice with dry wit rather than harsh criticism, while Anakin challenged instructions almost reflexively before carrying them out anyway. Watching them together, one could easily mistake them for brothers arguing over small matters, instead of master and student protecting one of the Republic's most important political figures. The second assassination attempt arrived under cover of darkness. While Padme slept inside her Coruscant apartment, the bounty hunter Zam Wessel released 2 deadly cowhounds through a maintenance droid into the bedroom. Obi-Wan sensed danger moments before the venomous creatures reached their target. Anakin destroyed the insects with his lightsaber, while Obi-Wan pursued the fleeing assassin through the crowded sky lanes of Coruscant. The chase became one of the city's most spectacular pursuits, weaving between towering skyscrapers, neon traffic corridors, freight platforms, and civilian transports suspended thousands of meters above the planet's surface. Eventually, Anakin captured Zam alive, only for a toxic dart fired from the shadows to silence her forever. Why did that single dart matter more than the assassin herself? Obi-Wan immediately recognized that its unusual design did not belong to ordinary underworld criminals. The Jedi Council entrusted him with tracing its origin, while Anakin escorted Padme back to Naboo for her protection. At first, the investigation appeared almost hopeless. Even Dexter Jetster, Obi-Wan's longtime Basilisk friend who operated a diner on Coruscant, had to study the weapon carefully before identifying it. Dex recognized the dart as Kaminoan in origin. The problem was that Kamino no longer appeared anywhere in the Jedi archives. The mystery deepened inside the temple library. Jedi Chief Librarian Jocasta Nu searched the archives but found no record of Kamino's existence. Confident in the completeness of the archives, she famously remarked that if a system did not appear there, it did not exist. Yet Obi-Wan trusted evidence over certainty. Guided by Master Yoda's subtle instruction, he examined gravitational data surrounding neighboring star systems and discovered that someone had deliberately erased Kamino from the archive records. The realization carried disturbing implications. Only a Jedi with exceptional access could have removed an entire planetary system from the temple's navigational database. Storm clouds rolled endlessly above Kamino's global ocean when Obi-Wan finally arrived. Towering white cities stood upon immense stilts rising from the water, while powerful waves crashed endlessly below polished landing platforms. The Kaminoans welcomed him without hesitation, believing the Jedi had come to inspect an army commissioned years earlier. Prime Minister Lama Su calmly explained that Jedi Master Sifo Dyas had ordered a clone army for the Republic approximately 10 years before, shortly before his death. Modern canon confirms that Sifo Dyas genuinely initiated the project after foreseeing catastrophic conflict, though Darth Sidious and Count Dooku later seized control of the program for their own purposes. Obi-Wan immediately realized he had uncovered something far larger than an assassination plot. What must Obi-Wan have felt while walking through endless ranks of soldiers, bred for a war the Republic did not yet officially fight? Millions of identical clone troopers trained across Kamino's platforms with flawless discipline. Every soldier had been genetically engineered from a single template. That template stood waiting nearby. Jango Fett, the galaxy's most renowned bounty hunter, had agreed to serve as the Army's genetic donor in exchange for extraordinary payment and one unaltered clone son, Boba Fett, whom he would raise as his own child. Obi-Wan recognized Jango as the likely source of the Kaminoan dart and confronted him outside his quarters. The duel that followed unfolded beneath relentless rain. Obi-Wan and Jango battled across slippery landing platforms while thunder rolled over the endless sea. Jango's Mandalorian armor, wrist-mounted weapons, flamethrower, cable launcher, and jetpack created a fighting style unlike anything Obi-Wan normally faced. Despite those advantages, the Jedi gradually forced the bounty hunter into retreat. Jango escaped aboard the slave wine with young Boba beside him, racing toward the planet Geonosis. Obi-Wan followed immediately, believing the bounty hunter would lead him directly to whoever had hired him. Geonosis presented a dramatic contrast to Kamino. Instead of endless oceans, red deserts stretched beneath towering rock spires, carved into vast hive cities by the insectoid Geonosians. There, Obi-Wan discovered the true heart of the separatist movement, hidden inside immense factories. Representatives of the Trade Federation, the Techno Union, the Commerce Guild, the Intergalactic Banking Clan, and other powerful corporate alliances secretly pledged military support to Count Dooku. Battle droid foundries operated without pause, assembling an army capable of challenging the Republic itself. Obi-Wan transmitted every detail to Coruscant before his position was discovered. Captured and imprisoned, Obi-Wan finally met Count Dooku face to face. The older man remained calm, dignified, and surprisingly courteous, nothing like the monster many expected. Dooku spoke openly about corruption inside the Senate and then revealed something even more astonishing. He claimed that the Republic had already fallen under the influence of a Dark Lord of the Sith named Darth Sidious. In one sense, Dooku told the truth. Sidious did control the Republic from within. Yet every word also served the Sith plan, mixing honesty with deception so skillfully that Obi-Wan rejected the warning entirely. Trusting a confessed separatist leader over the institutions he'd served since infancy seemed impossible. Soon afterward, Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala arrived on Geonosis in a desperate rescue attempt that failed almost immediately. All three prisoners were sentenced to public execution inside the vast Petranaki arena before thousands of cheering Geonosians. Massive creatures, the Reek, the Acklay, and the Nexu, were released to kill them for spectacle. As the arena gates thundered open and distant factories continued building the first great armies of the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan realized that diplomacy had finally reached its end. The galaxy he had known since childhood was about to disappear forever. Why did the first battle of the Clone Wars begin, not with carefully prepared armies, but with 3 condemned prisoners standing in chains beneath an alien sky? The answer reveals how quickly the Republic lost control of events. Count Dooku had gathered the leadership of the Confederacy of Independent Systems on Geonosis, believing secrecy still protected his plans. Instead, Obi-Wan's investigation forced the conflict into the open before either side had intended. Within hours, diplomacy vanished beneath the sound of blaster fire, and the Jedi Order found itself transformed from peacekeepers into generals. No member of the Council had sought such a future, yet every path toward avoiding it had already been closed by Darth Sidious years before. Inside the Petranaki arena, thousands of Geonosian spectators filled towering stone galleries carved directly into the canyon walls. Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padme were chained separately, each facing a different execution beast. Obi-Wan confronted the Acklay, a towering six-legged predator covered in armored plates and razor-sharp claws. Anakin faced the Reek, a massive horned quadruped capable of crushing armored vehicles. Padme struggled against the swift and deadly Nexu, whose claws tore across the stone as it stalked its prey. The spectacle was designed not merely to kill them, but to demonstrate separatist power before influential allies gathered from across the galaxy. The three captives refused to die quietly. Padme freed herself first, using a broken chain to escape the Nexu while receiving deep claw wounds across her back during the struggle. Anakin managed to calm the Reek through the Force before riding the enormous creature directly into battle. Obi-Wan used every moment of experience acquired under Qui-Gon, avoiding the Acklay's crushing attacks until opportunity finally allowed him to seize a fallen weapon. Their resistance bought only a little time. Surrounded by battle droids and Geonosian warriors, they remained hopelessly outnumbered. What convinced Mace Windu that negotiation had finally become impossible? The answer arrived with the sudden appearance of nearly 200 Jedi entering the arena. Guided by Mace Windu after receiving Obi-Wan's transmission, the rescue force included masters such as Kit Fisto, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Shak Ti, Luminara Unduli, Isla Secura, Plo Koon, Aegon Kolar, Coleman Trebor, and many others. Blue, green, and purple lightsabers ignited across the arena floor in one breathtaking moment. Windu offered Count Dooku a final opportunity to surrender peacefully. Dooku declined without hesitation, ordering the battle droids to open fire. The fighting that followed became one of the bloodiest engagements the Jedi Order had experienced in generations. The Jedi possessed extraordinary skill, but they had trained for individual conflicts and diplomatic missions rather than prolonged warfare against mechanized armies. Battle droids surrounded them from every direction, supported by droidicas whose deflector shields resisted ordinary blaster fire. One by one, Jedi Knights and Masters fell across the arena floor. Canon never identifies every casualty by name, but the losses were severe enough to shock an order that had known centuries without full-scale war. Obi-Wan fought beside Anakin with remarkable coordination, yet even together they could not halt the advancing tide. Relief arrived from the sky. Republic Acclamator-class assault ships descended through Geonosis's atmosphere, carrying the clone army from Kamino under the command of Jedi leadership. LAAT/I gunships swept into the arena amid explosions and heavy blaster fire, extracting surviving Jedi while clone troopers established defensive positions below. The Grand Army of the Republic officially entered combat for the first time. Every clone wore white Phase 1 armor and carried the same face beneath the helmet, that of Jango Fett. Their discipline was immediate, their formations flawless, and their obedience absolute. To many Jedi, the arrival felt miraculous. Only much later would Obi-Wan understand the hidden price built into that miracle. Why did Obi-Wan accept command of clone soldiers so naturally despite meeting them only hours earlier? Partly because the circumstances allowed no alternative. The Republic now possessed an army while the Separatists fielded millions of battle droids supported by enormous factories on Geonosis. The Jedi alone lacked the numbers required to defend countless member worlds. Obi-Wan treated the clones not as expendable machines, but as individual soldiers worthy of respect, a habit that distinguished him throughout the war. The clones responded with unwavering loyalty. That mutual trust would become one of the defining characteristics of Obi-Wan's military career. The battle expanded across Geonosis's rocky plains. Republic ATTE walkers advanced through dust clouds, while SPHAT artillery targeted separatist positions from extreme range. Hailfire droids launched devastating missile barrages, and Geonosian starfighters clashed with Republic gunships overhead. Amid the confusion, Count Dooku escaped aboard his solar sailor carrying the completed plans for a superweapon secretly commissioned by Darth Sidious. Those schematics describe the battle station that would eventually become the Death Star, though neither Obi-Wan nor the Republic understood their significance at the time. One war had begun, while another, decades in the future, quietly took shape. Obi-Wan and Anakin pursued Dooku into a dark Geonosian hangar. The confrontation carried deeply personal meaning for Obi-Wan. Standing before him was not only the leader of the Separatists, but also the former master of Qui-Gon Jinn. Dooku's elegance remained unmistakable. He fought with Form 2, Makashi, the lightsaber style perfected for duels against other Force users. Every movement appeared almost effortless. Against ordinary opponents, Obi-Wan's disciplined defense proved extraordinarily effective. Against Dooku's refined precision, it was not enough. The duel ended quickly and painfully. Dooku overwhelmed Obi-Wan through superior technique and decades of additional experience, inflicting serious injuries that left the Jedi unable to continue fighting. Anakin charged forward alone despite Obi-Wan's earlier warnings about patience and cooperation. His courage never wavered, but confidence could not replace experience. Dooku severed Anakin's right arm with a single decisive strike before Yoda entered the chamber. The aged Grand Master demonstrated astonishing mastery of the Force and lightsaber combat despite his small stature, forcing Dooku into retreat. Rather than risk capture, Dooku endangered Obi-Wan and Anakin simultaneously, compelling Yoda to choose between pursuing the Sith or saving his fellow Jedi. Yoda chose life. Why did that choice echo throughout Obi-Wan's later years? Because it reflected the central difference between Jedi and Sith. Dooku sacrificed lives whenever doing so advanced his objective. Yoda abandoned the chance to capture a Sith Lord rather than allow companions to die. The tactical decision permitted Dooku's escape. Yet it remained entirely consistent with Jedi principles. Obi-Wan witnessed that lesson while recovering from his injuries. Victory measured only by eliminating an enemy was never enough for the order he served. In the war's immediate aftermath, celebrations gave way to unsettling new realities. Chancellor Palpatine received emergency powers from the Galactic Senate, greatly expanding executive authority in the name of defending the Republic. The clone army spread rapidly across thousands of worlds as new campaigns erupted almost daily. Anakin secretly married Padme Amidala on Naboo in a quiet ceremony, attended only by C-3PO and R2-D2, a union deliberately hidden from the Jedi Order. Obi-Wan knew nothing of the marriage. Instead, he accepted a new title that would define the next 3 years of his life. Jedi Knight Obi Wan Kenobi became General Obi Wan Kenobi, commander of the Republic's clone forces, stepping into a war that would shape him into one of the galaxy's greatest heroes while carrying him steadily toward its greatest tragedy. Why did Obi Wan Kenobi become one of the Republic's most successful generals while never truly believing that the Jedi were meant to fight wars? That quiet contradiction defined nearly every day of the Clone Wars. The Jedi Order accepted military leadership because the Republic desperately needed experienced commanders capable of coordinating campaigns across thousands of systems. Yet their training had prepared them to preserve peace, not to direct vast armies into battle after battle. Obi-Wan fulfilled his responsibilities with exceptional skill, but he never glorified conflict itself. Every victory brought another assignment, another battlefield, and another reminder that the Republic had drifted far from the ideals the Jedi had sworn to defend. Among the clone formations, Obi-Wan became inseparable from the 212th Attack Battalion. Its troops wore distinctive orange markings upon their white armor and served alongside the famed 7th Sky Corps throughout much of the war. At their head stood Clone Commander CC-2224, known simply as Commander Cody. Like every clone, Cody shared Jango Fett's face, yet years of combat shaped a personality uniquely his own. He combined tactical precision with quiet humor, absolute professionalism, and unwavering loyalty toward his Jedi general. Obi-Wan returned that loyalty with genuine respect, addressing the clones as soldiers rather than disposable equipment. The friendship between Obi-Wan and Cody grew naturally through shared campaigns. They planned assaults together aboard Republic Venator-class star destroyers, exchanged observations before dangerous operations, and developed the easy rhythm found only between comrades who repeatedly entrusted one another with their lives. Obi-Wan listened when Cody offered tactical advice. Cody trusted Obi-Wan's judgment even during seemingly impossible missions. Their conversations often carried understated warmth rather than dramatic declarations. Looking back after Order 66, that ordinary friendship becomes one of the most heartbreaking relationships in Obi-Wan's life. What made Obi-Wan such an effective battlefield commander despite lacking Anakin's bold aggressiveness? The answer rested in patience. Obi-Wan rarely chased spectacular victories. Instead, he relied upon reconnaissance, disciplined positioning, coordinated clone formations, and careful timing. His mastery of Soresu extended beyond lightsaber combat into military thinking itself. He absorbed pressure, waited for opponents to overextend themselves, and struck only when success became likely. Many clone officers came to value that measured approach because it consistently brought them home alive. One of the war's earliest major campaigns unfolded on Christophsis. The crystalline world became strategically important after separatist forces established a blockade around its capital city. Obi-Wan and Anakin worked together to break that siege while facing enormous numbers of battle droids commanded by General Harm Loathsome. During the campaign, they also encountered an unexpected arrival. Master Yoda introduced Anakin to his own Padawan learner, the young Togruta Ahsoka Tano. Obi-Wan watched the meeting with amused curiosity as two remarkably stubborn personalities immediately clashed. Ahsoka changed more than Anakin's future. She subtly altered Obi-Wan's role as well. Until then, Obi-Wan had carried nearly all responsibility for Anakin's development. The arrival of a student forced Anakin himself to become a teacher, offering him perspective he had never previously possessed. Obi-Wan occasionally stepped back, observing the pair with gentle satisfaction as they learned from one another. Their disagreements frequently reminded him of his own younger years with Qui-Gon Jinn. The similarities were impossible to ignore. Why did Obi-Wan often seem to understand Anakin better than Anakin believed? The answer appeared repeatedly throughout the Clone Wars, particularly whenever Padme Amidala entered the story. Canon strongly suggests that Obi-Wan gradually recognized the growing romantic bond between Anakin and Padme long before either openly admitted it. He noticed lingering glances, unexplained absences, and subtle changes in Anakin's behavior that escaped many other Jedi. Yet Obi-Wan rarely confronted him directly. Whether out of compassion, uncertainty, or the hope that Anakin would eventually speak honestly, he chose observation over accusation. One memorable example came during the events surrounding Cato Neimoidia. While pursuing separatist operations, Obi-Wan quietly remarked that Anakin's feelings for Padme were obvious enough to anyone paying attention. His words carried neither anger nor condemnation. Instead, they reflected the gentle disappointment of someone watching a beloved brother struggle beneath secrets growing heavier each year. Obi-Wan understood attachment more deeply than many assumed. He simply believed honesty remained essential if those emotions were ever to be faced responsibly. That belief became even more meaningful because Obi-Wan himself carried feelings he never fully expressed. Years before the Clone Wars, while protecting the royal family of Mandalore during its civil conflict, he had grown close to Duchess Satine Kryze. Their connection endured across many years, despite long separations. Satine eventually transformed Mandalore into a fiercely neutral society governed by the new Mandalorians, rejecting the warrior traditions that had once defined her world. Whenever Obi-Wan visited Mandalore during the war, old emotions quietly resurfaced beneath formal conversation. What might have happened if Satine had asked Obi-Wan to leave the Jedi Order before the Clone Wars began? The answer comes remarkably close to canon itself. During one conversation, Obi-Wan admitted that had Satine requested it at the time, he would have left the Jedi Order for her. The statement remains one of the most revealing moments of his entire life. It does not contradict his devotion to Jedi ideals. Instead, it demonstrates that Obi-Wan understood attachment not merely as abstract philosophy, but as lived experience. He knew exactly what Anakin risked because he had once stood at a similar crossroads himself. The Mandalorian crisis grew steadily more dangerous as the terrorist organization Death Watch sought to overthrow Satine's peaceful government. Led publicly by Pre Vizsla, Death Watch rejected the new Mandalorians' pacifism and longed to restore Mandalore's martial identity. Unknown to the Republic at first, Count Dooku manipulated these conflicts whenever they served separatist interests. Obi-Wan repeatedly traveled to Mandalore, attempting to preserve both Satine's government and the planet's neutrality. Each visit reminded him that some battles could not be solved through military strength alone. While Obi-Wan balanced diplomacy, military campaigns, and hidden personal feelings, another shadow continued, expanding unnoticed. Chancellor Palpatine increasingly requested Anakin's presence for private consultations, praising the young Jedi's achievements and quietly encouraging dissatisfaction with the Council. Obi-Wan respected the Chancellor as the Republic's elected leader and therefore saw little reason to object publicly. He recognized that Palpatine favored Anakin, but interpreted the relationship as political mentorship rather than calculated manipulation. Like nearly everyone else in the Republic, Obi-Wan looked directly at the architect of the galaxy's destruction without recognizing Darth Sidious standing behind the kindly smile. Why did the Clone Wars begin breaking Obi-Wan's heart long before they ever broke the Republic? By the war's second and third years, victories no longer carried the optimism they once had. Every campaign saved one world only to reveal another already under siege. Jedi Knights, who had once settled trade disputes, now memorized casualty reports and fleet deployments. Clone troopers who had introduced themselves with quiet confidence disappeared from future rosters after battles on distant planets. Obi-Wan continued serving with unwavering discipline, yet each mission reminded him that peace seemed farther away than when the fighting had first begun. One of the greatest blows came not from the Separatists, but from within the Jedi Order itself. Ahsoka Tano was falsely accused of bombing the Jedi Temple hangar on Coruscant after an explosion killed several workers and clone personnel. The investigation led by the Republic appeared to point toward her involvement, while the true culprit, Barriss Offee, carefully manipulated evidence behind the scenes. Despite Obi-Wan's belief in Ahsoka's character, the Council ultimately allowed her to stand trial before the Republic military. Their decision reflected growing political pressure rather than certainty of guilt. For Anakin, it became a profound betrayal that permanently damaged his faith in the institution both he and Obi-Wan had devoted their lives to serving. Obi-Wan watched those events unfold with visible concern. He understood the Council's reasoning, even while recognizing the pain it caused. That tension defined him throughout the war. He rarely rejected the Council outright, but neither did he ignore the emotional cost of difficult decisions. When Anakin eventually uncovered Barriss Offee's deception and cleared Ahsoka's name, the Council invited her back into the Order, describing the ordeal as a kind of spiritual trial. Ahsoka declined. Watching her walk away from the temple, Obi-Wan witnessed another thread connecting Anakin to the Jedi quietly snap. What did Obi-Wan see that others missed after Ahsoka left? Canon never gives a direct answer, but his expressions and later conversations reveal much. He recognized that Anakin had lost someone who understood him in ways few others could. Ahsoka had shared years of combat, sacrifice, frustration, and humor alongside her master. Her departure left Anakin increasingly isolated inside an Order where he already struggled to feel fully accepted. Obi-Wan attempted to bridge that distance through friendship. Yet he could never entirely replace the student who had become almost a younger sister to Anakin. While those personal fractures widened, the military conflict grew even darker. General Grievous expanded separatist operations across the Outer Rim, launching raids that struck civilian infrastructure alongside military targets. Obi-Wan encountered the cyborg commander repeatedly throughout the war, whether above Seleucami, on Florum, or during campaigns depicted in both the animated series and later events leading directly into Revenge of the Sith. Grievous remained one of the few opponents capable of overwhelming experienced Jedi through sheer aggression. Armed with 4 lightsabers collected from fallen victims, he relied upon intimidation, mechanical speed, and relentless attack rather than connection to the Force. Each duel between Obi-Wan and Grievous revealed why Sora Sue had become indispensable. Where younger Jedi might have attempted spectacular offensive combinations, Obi-Wan survived by refusing to panic. His blade formed compact defensive circles that absorbed torrents of strikes, until Grievous inevitably created an opening through impatience. The cyborg often mocked Obi-Wan with theatrical confidence, while Obi-Wan answered with understated humor that subtly unsettled his opponent. These exchanges became almost familiar across the years, yet the danger never diminished. Every encounter reminded Obi-Wan that skill alone did not end wars. Endurance often mattered more. Why did Darth Maul return from the dead, and why did fate bring him back into Obi-Wan's life? Modern canon answers the first question directly. Maul survived his defeat on Naboo through extraordinary hatred amplified by the dark side, eventually replacing his severed lower body with crude mechanical, spider-like limbs, before later receiving more stable cybernetic legs. His mind, however, had fractured under years of isolation and obsession. Once restored by his brother Savage Oprys and the Night Sisters of Dathomir, Maul abandoned any hope of serving Sidious faithfully. His existence narrowed toward one consuming purpose: revenge against Obi Wan Kenobi. That revenge reached its cruelest form on Mandalore. Maul and Death Watch, after manipulating galactic criminal syndicates through the Shadow Collective, overthrew Duchess Satine Kryze's government and seized control of the planet. Obi-Wan traveled to Mandalore in a desperate attempt to rescue her, but was captured instead. Bound helplessly before Maul, he watched as Satine declared her love one final time. Maul ignited the Darksaber and drove it through her chest, killing her while forcing Obi-Wan to witness every moment. It was not a tactical execution. It was calculated emotional torture designed to inflict the same grief Maul had carried since Naboo. The aftermath revealed remarkable restraint. Obi-Wan mourned Satine deeply, yet he refused to surrender to hatred even after such a devastating loss. The temptation certainly existed. Few Jedi suffered so personal a wound inflicted so deliberately by the dark side. Nevertheless, Obi-Wan chose compassion over vengeance, remaining faithful to the ideals that Qui-Gon had nurtured decades earlier. His grief became another burden quietly carried rather than transformed into anger. In that choice, he stood in direct contrast to Anakin, whose fear of losing those he loved increasingly pushed him toward desperate solutions. The war itself approached its final stage. Republic victories gradually compressed separatist territory, while Count Dooku and General Grievous concentrated remaining forces around increasingly important strategic worlds. Chancellor Palpatine appeared more indispensable than ever. praised throughout the Senate as the steady leader, guiding civilization through unprecedented crisis. Few recognized that every success strengthened his political authority. Emergency powers intended as temporary measures became ordinary instruments of government. The Republic still existed in name, yet its transformation into something far more centralized had already begun. What warning did Obi-Wan fail to recognize before it was too late? Looking backward, the signs surrounded him. The Council trusted Palpatine less with each passing month. Anakin trusted him more. Clone commanders remained loyal beyond all reasonable expectation. Dooku had once spoken the truth about Darth Sidious while disguising it within lies. Ahsoka had walked away from the Order. Satine had died because Maul wanted Obi-Wan to suffer. None of these events seemed connected when viewed separately. Together they formed the final pieces of a design Darth Sidious had been constructing since before the Battle of Naboo. Soon the war would return to Coruscant itself, and Obi Wan Kenobi would face the last campaign of the Republic he had sworn to protect. Why did the Republic collapse in only a few days after surviving 3 years of galactic war? The answer is that the collapse had not truly occurred in a matter of days. Darth Sidious had spent decades arranging every alliance, every crisis, and every political compromise so that the final transformation would appear almost inevitable. By the opening days of Revenge of the Sith, the Clone Wars had reached their closing stage. The Confederacy of Independent Systems had lost much of its territory, yet Count Dooku and General Grievous remained at large. Sidious understood that victory itself could become the final weapon. The Republic no longer needed to be defeated. It merely needed one last push toward becoming an empire. The campaign began above Coruscant. General Grievous launched a daring assault directly against the Republic capital, leading a massive separatist fleet into orbit, while Chancellor Palpatine was taken aboard Grievous's flagship, the Invisible Hand. Obi-Wan and Anakin piloted Eta II Actis-class Jedi interceptors through enormous battles unfolding amid burning cruisers, collapsing hangars, and endless formations of vulture droids. Their mission remained simple in principle and almost impossible in practice. Rescue the Chancellor, destroy the Separatist command, escape before the flagship fell into the atmosphere. Inside the Invisible Hand, the familiar partnership between Obi-Wan and Anakin returned one final time. They fought through battle droids with practiced coordination refined across countless campaigns. Obi-Wan's calm strategy balanced Anakin's speed and improvisation exactly as it always had. Their confidence carried the warmth of two brothers who no longer needed many words to understand one another. Watching them in these opening moments, it is difficult to imagine that only days later they would meet as enemies on Mustafar. What did Obi-Wan fail to hear during the duel between Anakin and Count Dooku? After confronting the Sith Lord in the Chancellor's observation chamber, Obi-Wan engaged Dooku while Anakin joined the battle moments later. Dooku had defeated them both on Geonosis years earlier. This time events unfolded differently. The older Sith overpowered Obi-Wan first, hurling him unconscious beneath fallen structures. Unable to intervene, Obi-Wan never witnessed the conversation that followed. After Anakin disarmed Dooku, Palpatine quietly urged him to execute the helpless prisoner. Against years of Jedi teaching and despite initial hesitation, Anakin obeyed. That unseen moment marked the first irreversible step toward Darth Vader. Obi-Wan awoke with no knowledge of what had truly happened. He believed Dooku had died during combat rather than execution. Together, he and Anakin piloted the crippled invisible hand through Coruscant's atmosphere, guiding the massive vessel toward an emergency landing while sections of the ship broke apart under immense heat. The rescue became one of the Republic's greatest public triumphs. Citizens celebrated their returning heroes. Palpatine praised Anakin with increasing warmth and confidence. Obi-Wan accepted congratulations with characteristic humility, unaware that the Chancellor had already tightened his influence over the young Jedi. Soon afterward, the Jedi Council assigned Obi-Wan another crucial mission. Intelligence located General Grievous on the sinkhole world of Utapau, where Separatist leaders hoped to regroup after Coruscant. Obi-Wan volunteered immediately. The decision appeared perfectly logical. No Jedi possessed greater experience fighting Grievous. Anakin, however, remained behind on Coruscant, frustrated by Council decisions that increasingly placed him between loyalty to the Jedi and loyalty to Chancellor Palpatine. Their farewell before Obi-Wan departed carried quiet affection. Neither believed it would become the last peaceful conversation they ever shared. Why did Obi-Wan become the one Jedi capable of defeating General Grievous? Their duel on Utapau reflected years of accumulated experience rather than sudden inspiration. Descending into the vast sinkhole city atop a Varectil named Boga, Obi-Wan confronted Grievous amid towering platforms suspended over dizzying depths. The cyborg unleashed all 4 stolen lightsabers simultaneously, creating the whirlwind assault that had overwhelmed so many Jedi before. Obi-Wan answered not with greater speed, but with disciplined defense. Every strike, every step, every measured retreat reflected decades spent mastering Soresu. When Grievous attempted to flee, Obi-Wan pursued relentlessly, eventually exposing the organ sac, protecting the cyborg's remaining biological heart, and destroying it with Grievous's own blaster. Victory on Utapau should have marked the closing chapter of the Clone Wars. Instead, it became the moment everything unraveled. While Obi-Wan communicated success to Coruscant, Chancellor Palpatine revealed his true identity to Anakin Skywalker. He admitted that he was Darth Sidious, the Sith Lord the Jedi had hunted throughout the entire war. Anakin immediately informed Mace Windu, remaining outwardly faithful to the Order despite profound internal conflict. Windu confronted Sidious inside the Chancellor's office alongside Masters Agen Kolar, Sayasi Teen, and Kit Fisto. Only Windu survived the opening moments of the duel. Just as he prepared to end Sidious's reign, Anakin intervened. Mace Windu fell from the Chancellor's office into the endless city below. Darth Vader was born. On Utapau, Obi-Wan sensed a terrible disturbance through the Force before receiving any clear explanation. Then Commander Cody approached with apparent normality, even returning Obi-Wan's lightsaber after the battle. Moments later, Palpatine transmitted Order 66 across the Republic. The hidden behavioral inhibitor chips implanted within the clones on Kamino activated instantly. Cody's expression changed. Heavy cannon fire erupted against the cliff where Obi-Wan stood. Boga plunged with him into the waters below as clone troopers flooded the area searching for survivors. The commander who had fought beside him for years had become his executioner, in a single heartbeat, not through hatred, but through programming buried beyond his awareness. How did Obi-Wan survive when so many Jedi perished within minutes? Fortune alone cannot explain it. Experience, instinct, and the Force all combined in those desperate hours. After escaping Utapau, Obi-Wan stole a clone transport and contacted Bail Organa, one of the Republic's few remaining leaders still willing to aid the Jedi. Returning secretly to Coruscant alongside Master Yoda, he discovered the Jedi Temple transformed into a battlefield littered with fallen guardians and younglings alike. Security recordings revealed the unthinkable. Marching through the temple at the head of the 501st Legion stood Anakin Skywalker, now wearing dark robes as Darth Vader. Obi-Wan watched in silence as the apprentice he had raised became the instrument of the Order's destruction. In that unbearable moment, he realized the Republic had died, the Jedi had fallen, and the final duty left to him was one he had prayed would never become necessary. How do you fight the person you once loved, like a brother, without destroying the last part of yourself? No question defined Obi Wan Kenobi more completely than this one. After viewing the temple security recordings, he initially refused to believe Anakin Skywalker had willingly embraced the dark side. Even after witnessing Vader leading the assault on the Jedi Temple, Obi-Wan searched for another explanation. It was Master Yoda who finally spoke the words Obi-Wan could not accept. Anakin was gone. Darth Vader remained. The responsibility for confronting him could belong to no one else. Before seeking Vader, Obi-Wan accompanied Bail Organa to the volcanic asteroid facility of Polis Massa, where Padme Amidala had been taken after fleeing Coruscant. She arrived physically exhausted and emotionally devastated, unable to understand how the compassionate young man she loved had become the executioner described by Obi-Wan. Even then, she insisted there was still goodness within Anakin. Her faith never completely disappeared. Canon preserves that heartbreaking contrast throughout Revenge of the Sith. Obi-Wan had accepted that Vader must be stopped, while Padme continued believing the man she loved could somehow be reached. The final clues led to Mustafar. Once a mining world rich in valuable minerals, Mustafar had become a landscape of flowing lava rivers, black volcanic rock, and towers rising above oceans of fire. Darth Sidious had ordered the surviving leaders of the Separatist Council, including Newt Gunray, Wat Tambor, Poggle the Lesser, Shu Mai, and others, to gather there under Vader's protection. Instead, Vader systematically executed every one of them, bringing the Clone Wars to their true conclusion. The Confederacy of Independent Systems effectively ceased to exist in a single massacre. Sidious had created both sides of the war, and now he erased one with equal efficiency. Why did Obi-Wan hide aboard Padme's ship instead of confronting Vader openly? He understood that Padme remained the one person Anakin might still trust. If any conversation could prevent the coming duel, she alone possessed that possibility. Obi-Wan did not emerge until Vader's growing paranoia convinced him that Padme herself had betrayed him. Consumed by fear and manipulation, Vader used the Force to choke his own wife into unconsciousness, believing she had brought Obi-Wan to Mustafar deliberately. At that instant, Obi-Wan stepped forward from the ship's ramp. He did not ignite his lightsaber immediately. He first pleaded with the apprentice he had raised. The conversation remains among the most tragic in Star Wars canon. Obi-Wan spoke of the Republic, the Jedi, and the terrible choices Anakin had made, Vader answered with certainty that from his perspective, the Jedi had become traitors. Every attempt at reconciliation collapsed beneath years of Palpatine's manipulation, hidden fear, and accumulated mistrust. Obi-Wan realized there would be no peaceful ending. Blue and crimson lightsabers ignited against the glow of flowing lava. Teacher and student entered the duel both had unknowingly approached since the day they first met on Naboo. The duel across Mustafar stretched through control rooms, industrial platforms, narrow catwalks, collapsing towers, and floating mining machinery drifting above rivers of molten rock. Obi-Wan fought exactly as he always had, with patience, discipline, and defensive precision. Vader attacked with overwhelming aggression fueled by immense power and unrestrained emotion. Both men understood each other's techniques intimately after 13 years together. Every feint, every recovery, every familiar movement reflected lessons once practiced inside the Jedi Temple under entirely happier circumstances. This was not merely a contest of skill, it was a lifetime of shared experience turned against itself. What truly decided the outcome on Mustafar? Many remember only Obi-Wan's famous warning about the high ground, yet the deeper answer lies elsewhere. Vader had become extraordinarily powerful, but he had also become impatient. Throughout his life, Obi-Wan survived stronger opponents by waiting for exactly such moments. Standing safely above the volcanic bank, he urged Vader not to attempt the leap. It was genuine advice rather than mockery. Vader ignored it. Obi-Wan struck with one swift motion, severing both legs and Vader's remaining organic arm before his former apprentice slid helplessly toward the burning shore. The silence afterward carried greater weight than the battle itself. Flames rose around the broken figure who had once been Anakin Skywalker. Obi-Wan looked down through tears and spoke words that revealed every emotion he had struggled to suppress. You were the chosen one. He remembered Qui-Gon's faith, the prophecy, years of friendship, victories shared across countless battlefields, and the promise made beside a funeral pyre on Naboo. Then came the sentence that perhaps wounded Obi-Wan most deeply to utter. You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you. Those were not strategic remarks spoken to an enemy. They were a confession offered to someone he believed he had already lost forever. Obi-Wan departed only after recovering Anakin's lightsaber, the same weapon later entrusted to Luke Skywalker years afterward. Shortly afterward, Darth Sidious reached Mustafar and recovered Vader's ruined body. Medical droids reconstructed him inside the black armor that would define the remainder of his life. The suit kept him alive, but also imprisoned him in constant pain, a condition Sidious considered useful because suffering deepened Vader's connection to the dark side. When Vader finally asked about Padme, Sidious falsely declared that Vader himself had killed her. Whether Sidious knowingly lied or merely exploited misunderstanding, the result remained the same. Vader's last emotional anchor disappeared. Back on Polis Massa, Padme Amidala gave birth to twins before dying shortly afterward. Canon deliberately leaves the precise medical cause unresolved. Medical droids reported that she had physically healthy vital signs, yet had somehow lost the will to live, though that clinical explanation has remained debated by audiences ever since. Luke Skywalker and Leia Organa entered the galaxy at the very moment the Republic vanished forever. Bail Organa adopted Leia on Alderaan. Obi-Wan and Yoda agreed that Luke would be hidden on Tatooine with Owen and Beru Lars, where Anakin would never think to search. Why did Obi-Wan choose exile instead of continuing the fight immediately? The answer was not surrender. It was preservation. Yoda instructed him to watch over Luke while learning from the returned spirit of Qui-Gon Jinn, who had discovered the path to retaining consciousness after death through the Force. Obi-Wan accepted the task without complaint. He carried the weight of a fallen order, a broken republic, a lost brother, and 2 children whose future represented the galaxy's final hope. As his small craft disappeared toward the endless sands of Tatooine, the era of General Obi Wan Kenobi came to an end. Ahead waited 19 quiet years beneath twin suns, where the greatest Jedi of his age would become a forgotten hermit known simply as Ben. If you follow Obi-Wan Kenobi's life from the bright halls of the Jedi Temple to the silent dunes of Tatooine, one truth slowly becomes impossible to ignore. His story is not the tale of the strongest Jedi, nor the most gifted, nor even the one chosen by prophecy. Instead, it is the story of someone who continued choosing compassion after disappointment, discipline after grief, and hope after nearly every reason to abandon it had been placed before him. He lost his master to the Sith, watched the Republic decay into an empire, buried friends, witnessed the destruction of the order that had raised him, and faced the unbearable task of fighting the apprentice he had loved as family. Yet through each loss, he refused to let suffering decide who he would become. That quiet refusal is the thread connecting every chapter of his life. The Force itself seems to move differently around Obi-Wan than it does around many other heroes. Around Anakin Skywalker, it appears as overwhelming potential, immense power, and destiny so vast that it reshapes the entire galaxy. Around Emperor Palpatine, it becomes domination, manipulation, and the relentless pursuit of control over every living being. Around Obi-Wan, however, the Force reveals another possibility. It becomes patience instead of urgency, restraint instead of ambition, and service instead of ownership. He rarely tries to bend events toward his own desires. More often, he accepts that the future cannot be mastered, only met with wisdom when it finally arrives. That is why Obi-Wan's greatest victories often look like defeats when they first happen. He loses Qui-Gon, but preserves his master's final wish. He cannot prevent Anakin's fall, yet he protects Luke and Leia. He fails to save the Republic, but he safeguards the hope that will one day restore freedom to the galaxy. Even his duel on Mustafar ends not with triumph, but with mourning. The Star Wars saga repeatedly reminds us that history is rarely shaped by perfect victories. More often, it is carried forward by those who endure long enough to protect a single fragile possibility until someone else can finish the work. Modern Star Wars canon also quietly asks you to reconsider what heroism truly means. Legends are often built around dazzling battles, famous speeches, and impossible feats of courage. Obi-Wan certainly achieved all of those things. Yet the deeper measure of his character appears in quieter moments. Listening to a frightened child, showing respect to clone soldiers created only for war, forgiving people who disappointed him, resisting revenge after Satine's death, and continuing to believe in the light even after the temple itself lay in ruins. Those choices receive fewer celebrations inside the galaxy, but they are the foundation beneath everything that follows. Without them, Luke Skywalker never survives to begin his own journey. There is one final irony woven gently through Obi-Wan's entire life. He spent years believing he had failed Anakin Skywalker completely. From his own perspective, he had broken the promise made beside Qui-Gon's funeral pyre and watched the Chosen One become the greatest servant of the dark side. Yet history eventually revealed something Obi-Wan himself never fully lived to see. The kindness he had shown, the lessons he had taught, and the love he had confessed on Mustafar never disappeared. They remained buried beneath Darth Vader's armor for decades, waiting until a son who had learned hope from an old hermit would awaken them once more. In that sense, Obi-Wan's greatest victory was not won on Naboo, Geonosis, or Mustafar. It was won through years of faith that seemed, for the longest time, to accomplish nothing at all. And so your thoughts return to where they first began. The desert wind moves softly across the sands of Tatooine as evening settles over the lonely world. Two suns sink beneath the horizon exactly as they did countless times while an aging guardian stood watching from a distant ridge, saying little, asking for nothing, carrying memories too heavy for almost anyone else to bear. Somewhere beyond the quiet dunes, a young boy sleeps, without knowing the future waiting for him, while an old Jedi keeps his patient watch beneath the gathering stars. The galaxy has become silent once again, and in that silence, Obi Wan Kenobi remains exactly where we first found him, waiting with calm certainty for hope to rise with another sunrise.